Well, Dr. Teriba joins us. He is the CEO of Economic Associates to shed some light and dissect what was highlighted in that visit. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, I know you did have some reservations some time ago about the state of our economy, the state of our growth, but having seen some of the projections in the budget and the IMF boss's visit, has anything changed for you?
Oh, well, most Nigerians had reservations, and that was why you got the change in government. Even the government has expressed quite a lot of reservations. It's more of how soon are we going to get to start confronting, the problems that we had reservations about. And it's good that the president finally, last month, has announced his policy directions. And he also has announced his plans, his budget for the current year. It's a welcome development that has been also commended, by the visiting IMF managing director. How much of those reservations have been allayed? At least now we have a clear direction where the economy is heading, and we have, some more detail about the fiscal situation. Where I might say I have residual reservations, I must emphasize that I fully agree with the broad direction of the government. My reservation is about how we want to fund some of them. I think the government should create more room for private investment than borrowing to fund contractors. Every contractor is a potential investor with the right incentive. Private players can go and borrow money to do projects, on behalf of the government or with the government. So I have strong reservations about the plan to borrow 2 trillion naira in 2016.
You don't think we'll be able to finance that, the budget?
Well, you should be looking for investors, not creditors.
What kind of investors, local or foreign?
Both. Look at the telecom sector. If I were to ask you, what's the percentage of local investment compared to foreign, you are not going to say that it may be foreign investor dominated local investor. Those local players, some of them used to be contractors to government in the failing days of NITEL, but they've, to continue playing in their sector, have learned how to go and raise money to fund investment and generate profit and pay taxes to the federal government. So leaving investors completely out of the discussion of the budget, I think, is a very wrong step. The world highly esteems Nigeria, and the world highly esteems the new government, evidenced by the visit of the, IMF managing director and the duration of that visit. But it's not only the IMF that esteems Nigeria and the opportunities in Nigeria. Investors do. From what the Investment Promotion Commission says, so in the second half of last year, they received more than 100 investors visiting, making inquiries. Then you announce the budget and there's no room for them. I think that's going to be the wrong way forward. The strongest economies, the fastest growing economies in the world, India, China, the United States, all rely very heavily upon all sectors, to inflow of investment.
Yeah, but how are they precluded? Because if you say that the policy direction of government is clear in this budget, how are they precluded? Because we usually understand that investors look at where government is going and tend to put their money.
Not when you want to raise loans to fund contracts. The fact that you want to award the contracts means that you are shutting investors out.
Yeah,
that was not how you develop the telecom sector.
You do know the reservations.
The telecom sector did not develop on the back of government contracts.
I'm saying that you do know the reservations that oftentimes a lot of people have with private-public partnerships or public-private partnerships, as it were, and oftentimes the push the government usually needs to give it for those things to come to life. You don't think that there's still
public-private partnership. I'm talking of ending government monopoly in rail transportation, as you did in telecoms.
In rail?
In pipelines,
okay,
as you did in telecoms. Open these sectors to private investment. Liberalize them. Government monopoly has always failed us. There is no example of success with government monopoly. There is no example of a successful sectoral return with government contracts. We will end up having difficulties raising the anticipated revenue or raising the anticipated debt. We'll end up with debt service burden. We'll end up with uncompleted projects. When you liberalize sectors, projects get completed. When you allow investors to come in somehow, they don't end up with uncompleted projects. And there's no debt burden. You don't repay investors. Their investments are irreversible. Nigeria has the opportunity now. Nigeria should try. If you were saying that you tried to get investors in and you didn't succeed, therefore you have to do some borrowing, it's understandable. But after all the expectations of Nigerians, I am sure that Nigerians in diaspora are hoping to make remittances to support, to invest at home, if the government call for the investment.
Now you're talking about if, which is some kind of conditionality clauses that you have tried to put in, looking at the way it should go with this particular budget. But if you look at what is going on now, and IMF has said, well, we won't interfere, not yet. Are there some indices you have seen in place or towards achieving this particular 2016 budget that would make IMF make that statement to say, well, we don't see any reason for Nigeria to be borrowing, or we don't see any reason why we should come in now?
IMF doesn't get involved until a country has debt service difficulty. If a country has debt service difficulty, IMF will come in, and they take a very hard stance. And Nigerians know how that hurts. Okay? It's because right now, well, we don't have debt service. We can still find the money to service our debt. If we allow the debts to grow with the current low revenue situation, and you get into a situation where you cannot honor your external debt obligations, then you won't find IMF smiling at you.
Then are we looking in that direction already? Because for now, the president has continuously said that we want to look inwards. And you're talking about the investors. Perhaps let's talk about those that we will call local investors. Now we're talking about the investors here in the country.
Yes.
What are the potentials for the local investors, to the extent that it can also help pull some other external investors coming into the play?
First and foremost, government has to open up the sectors that will be the destination for the investment.
Chosen sectors?
Yeah, key infrastructure sectors. The sectors that are obstructing the growth of other sectors of the economy, including power, for example.
It's not open enough? I thought that's open already.
Well, the minister did say it's not sufficiently open. The transmission is still...
Yeah, federal government.
Yeah, you could. India has privatized transmission, the whole spectrum of the power sector. They privatized rail. This year, they announced a new limit for foreign investment in the rail sector. And guess what the limit is? 100% equity. That was India that used to be very, very closed. So until you step aside, until government gets out of the way, nobody can invest in
Yeah, but don't you
sectors.
think that this...
And you don't have to go and borrow money to give to contractors. Contractors can go and look for money to borrow to fund your own projects, rather than taking all the risks on their behalf. Let others come and share in this risk.
You don't think it needs to be gradual? I mean, some people will say that government must have gotten to a certain extent before, the private sector comes in.
Our experience with government operating rail, operating pipelines, has been a story of failure.